Everyone thinks Bigfoot is folklore. They're ignoring the physical evidence. For over 70 years, thousands of people have reported encounters with a creature that shouldn't exist. Not in the way you think. We're not talking about a myth that wandered into campfire stories. We're talking about sightings backed by footprint casts, hair samples, and thermal imaging, evidence that's been systematically dismissed without proper examination. The question isn't whether Bigfoot is real. The question is, why has serious science refused to look? Exhibit 1, the Patterson-Gimlin film. October 20th, 1967, Northern California. Two men on horseback captured 60 seconds of footage showing a bipedal, hair-covered creature walking across a creek bed. For decades, skeptics called it a man in a suit, but here's what they conveniently ignore: the gait analysis. Biomechanics experts who have studied the footage note the creature's stride length, arm swing, and center of gravity don't match any human wearing a costume. The proportions are wrong. The muscle movement is wrong. Could someone have faked it? Theoretically. But the film was shot on 16mm in 1967. The technology to create realistic prosthetics that moved like that, with muscle groups firing in sequence, with weight distribution matching primate anatomy, didn't exist yet. Digital effects weren't even a concept. You'd need a perfectly engineered costume and an actor trained in non-human biomechanics, on horseback, in remote wilderness. With no crew, no equipment, no budget. Exhibit 2, the footprint evidence. Not casual impressions in mud. We're talking about thousands of casts collected over decades. In 1969 alone, a researcher named Renee Dahinden collected over 100 plaster casts from a single area in British Columbia. Each one shows consistent dermatoglyphics, ridge patterns like human fingerprints, unique to individual specimens. No two casts were identical. That's not random. That's biological consistency. A hoaxer would need to create multiple custom foot molds, each with unique ridge patterns, and then systematically plant them across hundreds of miles of wilderness over 50 years. Not once, hundreds of times. Think about the logistics, the coordination, the motivation that sustains across decades and across different people who have never met. What would you do to pull off a hoax that convincing? Exhibit 3, hair samples. In 2012, a team of researchers conducted DNA analysis on hair samples allegedly from Bigfoot. The results were strange. The mitochondrial DNA showed markers that didn't match any known primate, not human, not chimpanzee, not bear. The nuclear DNA was too degraded to sequence fully. But here's what matters: the hair structure itself was unusual. Medullary index, pigment density, growth pattern, all inconsistent with known animals. The mainstream response: contamination, sample degradation, misidentification, possible bear hair. But none of those explanations account for the structural anomalies, and none of them explain why a legitimate laboratory would publish results they couldn't stand behind. They did publish. That means something was unusual enough to merit documentation, even if they couldn't definitively say what. Exhibit 4, witness testimony from credible sources. Not just hikers and campers, forest rangers, wildlife biologists. A woman in Oregon reported an encounter in the 1980s. She was a trained naturalist. She could distinguish every animal sound in that forest. She was terrified by something that didn't match any known animal. Her testimony was documented, but never seriously investigated by institutional science. Now here's where the story gets murky. In the 1970s and 80s, hoaxers absolutely got involved. People saw the attention Bigfoot was getting and decided to manufacture evidence. Fake footprints, costume sightings. Some of this was obvious, some of it wasn't. And that's exactly what skeptics use to dismiss everything. One hoax becomes a reason to discard all evidence. But contamination doesn't erase the legitimate cases. A single genuine photograph doesn't become fake because someone else faked photographs later. That's not how evidence works. That's how we excuse ourselves from having to look closer. And science has excused itself, repeatedly. Exhibit 5, the geographic consistency. Bigfoot sightings aren't random. They cluster in specific regions: the Pacific Northwest, Northern California, parts of the Rocky Mountains, areas with dense forest, minimal human population, and sufficient prey base to sustain a breeding population of large primates. That's not folklore distribution. That's ecological distribution. That's where an undocumented ape would actually live. Compare that to leprechaun sightings or lake monsters. Those appear everywhere: urban areas, deserts, places where they couldn't possibly survive. Bigfoot sightings follow ecological logic. They follow biogeography. That's not what folklore does. That's what undocumented animals do. So what's the most likely explanation? Either we have a breeding population of large, intelligent primates living undetected in North American wilderness, or we have the most elaborate, coordinated, multi-generational hoax in human history, spanning decades, involving hundreds of people, with no financial incentive, no organizational structure, and no evidence of coordination. One requires an animal. The other requires something even less plausible: perfect human conspiracy. The evidence isn't proof, not yet, but it's substantial enough that dismissal without examination is intellectually dishonest. The footprints are real objects, the film footage is real footage, the hair samples exist, the witness testimonies are documented. None of this proves Bigfoot exists, but it proves the question deserves better than mockery. What remains unknown is whether that evidence points to an animal, a hoax, or something we don't have a framework for yet, but unknown isn't the same as false. Unknown means the investigation isn't finished. And right now, the investigation has barely started, not because of lack of evidence, but because institutions decided the answer before examining the question. The Bigfoot phenomenon endures not because people are gullible. It endures because serious evidence exists and serious science has chosen to look away. That's the real story, not whether Bigfoot is real, but why we've decided not to find out. Subscribe. Every week we examine the evidence institutions ignore, so you can decide what's actually true.